Now when you're doing framing work with the Festool domino, you're going to be putting a mortise into both sides of the joint, and then it's when these two come together with the floating tenon, the domino between the two, that the joint is made. However, in order to do that accurately, you need to have a pencil line on both pieces of wood in exactly the right position so that you can then do the mortise in one piece and then in the other, and then the two will line up. But if you've got a lot to do, one needs to have a quicker, more accurate way of doing it, and that's what I'm going to show you now. Now my jig is used in two different ways. If you're using it along the long edge, you use it one way. If you use it in the end, you use it another. And I'll show you both. We're going to start with how it's used to put a domino slot in the ends. Now let me just take you through the arithmetic. The distance from the outer face here or here of the domino machine to dead centre is 66 millimetres. The slots I want to cut in this piece of wood, I want them 24 millimetres from this edge. 24 away from 66 is 42. And I've got a piece of wood here which is 42 millimetres wide. The criteria for this piece is that it has to have parallel sides and it must not be any thicker than the material into which you're going to be cutting the holes. The only other piece of wood we need now is this piece, which is the piece which the domino machine goes against on either side. Now all we need to do in order to cut a slot which is 24 millimetres from this edge into here is to have our edge piece, our distance piece and our piece of wood for the domino lined up, touching each other, and you would make the domino cut like so. The edge of the domino is up against this piece of wood, the spacer is keeping our workpiece exactly 42 millimetres from there, and the domino slot then goes in here. Now in order to do this safely, I'm using these fixed clamps which work perfectly with the MFT3 for holding pieces in place. So that's nice and secure, and all I have to do now is to register the side of the domino against here and against the end face of the wood, and then make my cut. Well, that's the first four done, and I've done them in this end. We now need to turn everything round because we're going to do the other ends here. And the trick is always make sure that your distance piece is against the edge where you're measuring from. So I'm doing the other ends, I want 24 millimetres from here, so therefore I've reversed the jig around, so I'm now registering against this side for this end. And now I've got the original slot there, and now the new one is there, and they're both biased towards this edge. And that's all four of those cross pieces done with the holes in the ends in the right place. We're now going to set up the jig so that we can put the slots into the ends of our face edge. Now, first thing I'm going to do is to put a pair of bench dogs here, and it's against those that my workpiece will be pushed. If you don't have bench dogs, then you can use some of these parts which come from the fixed clamps. The next thing to do is to put the spacer and the reference edge piece of wood onto the bench, and these need to be clamped in place. Now as you're doing this, you need to make sure that the end of the spacer does not go beyond the edge of the piece of wood where we want to put the slots, because if it did, then you wouldn't be able to register the domino properly up against the piece of wood that you're going to be cutting. So You just need to make sure you get that bit right, and these get fixed in place like so. And now we're ready to go. We've got our piece of wood, we've got our distance piece, we've got our reference edge, and so we can now make our cuts. That's the first 4 done, and then we reverse the jig to do the other side. Now in order to set this up, we're going to do a mirror image of what we had before. This goes in there, that goes there like so. I've got bench dogs here, and just tighten that up. And now my piece of wood is against those bench dogs, and we're ready to start cutting. Now when I'm doing this, I'm actually pushing down with my forearm here on the handle and holding this piece of wood in place with my hand.